The last video, we were looking at different theories of meta-ethics, different theories of what is it that makes certain actions morally right and certain actions morally wrong. And we were looking for some sort of standard that's going to determine that. And we looked at a couple that we just dismissed. So one is, well, your own desires make it the case that whatever you want is what's morally okay. That's out. Another is, well, God determines what's morally right and wrong. That's out. Another is, well, the law determines what's morally right or wrong. That's out. So, another hypothesis, another theory on the table here, it's the beliefs of the other people in your culture that determine what's morally right and wrong. So you might think, sure, if the other people in my culture believe that gay marriage is morally okay, then it is morally okay in my culture. And then on the other hand, there's these other cultures in which most of the people believe that gay marriage is not morally okay, so in that culture, it's not morally okay. So the first thing to notice is there's no one answer about what's morally right or morally wrong under this theory. It's instead relative to a culture. The same action, say me getting married to a dude, is going to be morally okay in one culture, but morally wrong in another. So notice right off the bat, there are a lot of different problems with this theory. It doesn't seem to really capture what we have in mind by, well, morally right and wrong judgments. So first off, notice if cultural relativism is true, you just can't criticize other cultures. You can't say, oh yeah, the Aztecs, that was really morally bad of them to be, making live human sacrifices and ripping the hearts out of their victims. Or you couldn't say, oh yeah, the Nazi culture, that was really morally wrong of them to be exterminating people. Because, after all, in their culture, that was considered morally okay, so cultural relativism would say, well, then it is morally okay in their culture. Notice also you couldn't have this idea of moral progress, of a particular society going from having bad moral beliefs and practices to good moral beliefs and practices. So, for instance, it wouldn't be coherent for us to say, look, the U.S. in the 1800s was doing really morally wrong things by enslaving lots of folks. It's a good thing that we change those practices and beliefs, so at least we're not enslaving folks, though we're still doing plenty of other terrible things to people. But if cultural relativism is correct, we could not say that. We just have to say, look, in the 19th century, U.S. culture was such that it was okay to enslave people, so no one was doing anything morally wrong if you enslaved people. In fact, those abolitionists who were fighting against slavery, they were actually doing something morally bad, because they were going against the prevailing cultural beliefs of their time. So, if cultural relativism is correct, it means you can't have moral progress, and moreover, it's morally wrong to advocate for social change, to try and get your culture to come to have better moral beliefs or better moral practices. And that all seems pretty implausible to most of us. So, there's some pretty good reasons right off the bat to think that cultural relativism is not going to do it for us as a theory of meta-ethics. Now, you might come back to me and say, but Andrew, it just seems so obvious that of course cultural relativism must be correct, because, look, just take one particular case, like the human sacrifice thing. It's clear that different cultures have different beliefs about what's morally right and wrong. I mean, look, on the one hand, the Aztecs believed it was morally okay to carry out human sacrifice, but, of course, in our culture, people believe that human sacrifice is morally wrong. So, look, it seems like the only conclusion is that in Aztec culture, human sacrifice is morally okay. In our culture, human sacrifice is morally wrong. Boom! That's cultural relativism right there. Now, what I want to show you is that just because the first two things are true, it doesn't mean that the conclusion there has to be true. We don't have to conclude that just because people disagree about what's morally right or morally wrong, that the same thing's right for one group, but wrong for another. And you can see this if you use the same kind of reasoning to reason about something else. So, say, the shape of the Earth. So you could be a geo-relativist, and you could say, well, look, you have to be a geo-relativist because look, there's this whole culture of flat earthers. They've got a society online you can join. Something like 2% of the U.S. population believes the earth is flat. They go to conferences. So we've got the Flat Earthers Society that believes the earth is flat. And then we've got, like, I don't know, mainstream culture that believes the earth is spherical. Well, two different cultures, two different beliefs. Therefore, using the same reasoning we just used before about human sacrifice, it seems we'd have to conclude, well, the earth is flat for the flat earthers, but it's spherical for, you know, like, basic folks in mainstream culture. And this is clearly wrong, right? Like, the earth has a shape regardless of what one group of people believes or another group of people believes. It has that shape independently of our beliefs. And it seems like we want to say the same thing about moral truths. It's true that different people disagree about what's morally right and morally wrong, but if something really is morally wrong, it's going to be morally wrong independently of whether someone believes it or not, or whether your whole culture believes it or not. So, this kind of reasoning is just not going to be good enough to get you to the conclusion of cultural relativism. That's what morally right or wrong depends on the beliefs of your culture. Alright, we'll come back with one more video and see if we can conclude anything from the fact that different people, different cultures disagree about what's morally right or wrong, and try and get something of a better theory of meta-ethics for us going forward.